Good evening and welcome to the Norwood Board of Selectmen's meeting for the 3rd of December 2019. We normally start at 7 p.m. Tonight it is 6:15, and the reason we're starting at 6:15 is we have an executive session that's expected to last for about 45 minutes. So let me read the Attorney General's recommendations, if I may. We're going into executive session to discuss the strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares. So with that said, I will take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion to go into executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Plasko?
Yes.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So we'll be going into executive session now, and we'll be coming back on camera at approximately 7 p.m. to continue our regular weekly meeting. Thank you all.
Going to be some good news, which is a good thing because the growth came in higher. But to have the exact numbers for your board to make a decision, my board would request a hearing continuance for 1 week so that we can give you the final picture with the new change of the growth coming into the adoption of such a shift from residential to commercial. That's basically where we're at. Like I said, I just wanted to touch upon the past year, the measure and list. The company that we hired were very appreciative of all the taxpayers. They said that Norwood had approximately 50% cooperation rate of people letting them into their houses to figure out, make sure that our records agreed with what was actually there. Very high compared to most other towns.
Can I just touch on that for a minute? If you choose not to let somebody a house, there is you lose a benefit.
There is. Under state law, if you deny admission to the house, then you really lose your chance to appeal the assessed value. This was an eye-opener because it's only done every 10 years by state law. There were a lot of pluses to having people come in. We had many calls of people who said they had looked at their property cards and said, you have me down as having 2 full baths. I only have a half bath. So we were able to go out and make that change. Or they might have had an in-ground pool that they filled in 5 years ago, yet they didn't pull a permit, and therefore we would never have known unless they had told us that. So somebody could have been paying taxes on an in-ground pool that had been gone. So part of the good thing that happened on this measure and list is that we were able to go out and pick up on things like that. So it increased in some areas, and it saved taxpayers on the flip side, that things that were being assessed shouldn't have been assessed and now are gone. So the values are what the state wants. They want us to be at 95% of fair market value.
That's a requirement by the state.
That's required by the state. So we don't really have much say except to take all the property sales. And this is something I probably wouldn't do normally, but for determining the property values for this year, all the property sales that occurred in 2018, January 1 of 18 to December 31st, those were used in determining the present market value. And you say, well, that's kind of outdated, but the state needs 1 year, 1 full year of data to come up with a value for properties for each class. And it's different than doing an appraisal, which I did for many years. An appraisal basically takes what's sold in your neighborhood within 6 months and within a mile. And it's usually a much more defined market area. But when you're appraising every property in the town, you need much more data. You need a full year's worth of data from not just in the neighborhood. It might be from miles away, but it's a cape to a cape, or a colonial to a colonial, or a ranch to a ranch. So once all that data is collected, it's submitted to the state, and they go over it with a fine-tooth comb. And they want to make sure, if I say something's worth 400,000, that it's better be close to 95%, or at 95% of that. So that's just a little background for basically for the public to know how we come up with it. We don't just go out and say, well, that house over there sold for 300, so that's got to be the same. It could be apples and oranges. If one is a split level and one is a cape, it's totally different parameters in using to determine what the market value. So we're very confident. We submit it to the state, they review it, and they say, okay, you're good to go. And the same thing with the new growth. It's very important to show people, or to prove to the state, how we came up with new growth. In the past year, we picked up a tremendous amount of new growth by that door-to-door process. But we also had some projects that have come in that have generated growth, which you could start with Moderna, which when they came in, they've spent a lot of money refurbishing the old Polaroid plant. We have Avalon, which is presently almost 90% complete, but back in June, when we had to set the value, it was about 50% complete. We also had, say, TD Bank came online this year. Just trying to think of some of the other projects. The BJ's gas station and the Wendy's came in, although they said, well, they've been there a year, but you have to go by June 1st or June 30th of what was done that year. So they might have been at different aspects of being built then. And we've also had quite a few number of condominiums that have been completed at Endicott, which contributed to the new growth. So once all they're submitted, once the new growth is submitted, we're at the point where we're ready to determine who's going to bear the percentage of the taxes. So we're 99% at that point right now. This one change this afternoon kind of skewed it to the favor of the taxpayers. So I think it would be wise for the board to hold off giving you the number, because I think the taxpayers would be happy to have a little bit less of a burden coming.
And I think we can all agree on this side of the table. Before I take or entertain a vote, I'll take some questions or comments from my board. Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McDonough, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Howard.
Well, you mentioned 95% of current value. Campanelli, as we know, they've been sold.
Yep.
Substantial price. Are we going to be close to that price?
On which property? Up?
The apartment complex.
They're commercial properties like that are mostly assessed based upon income. They have to show us what they're bringing in for rentals, basically. You never get to that complete percentage of what you want to be at. Although it's sold for a higher number, it's
Way
still
higher.
Yeah,
Double.
way higher. It still has to be approved by the state based upon what's submitted for income.
For income, I thought it was value. It's not, huh?
Well, it's on residential predominantly. It's on value. You can compare a cape to a cape. On a commercial property that's basically making money.
This is a residential, it's residential, but it's considered
It's residential, but
because
it was purchased basically to make money for the buyer.
But they get the residential rate.
They get the residential rate.
Right.
Yeah, by
I
state.
understand all that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if they got a purchase price more than double what the assessed valuation is,
Yep. You can't automatically assess them at what they paid for it, is what it comes down to. It'd be no different than if somebody really wanted a particular house and they paid more than the market dictates. You can't automatically just go to that purchase price just because somebody wanted it. It's the same thing I'm finding with Windsor Gardens, which sold for much higher. And I had all kinds of investors calling me, coming in and trying to figure out what the tax ramifications were gonna be. In my estimation, somebody paid way more than the market would bear. However, there are other factors that come into commercial property, such as long-term investment. They may have money they just want to park and leave at something like that, that they know is an income producer. It doesn't justify what normal would be. In other words, somebody shouldn't be paying that kind of money for Windsor Gardens. However, if it's an offshore company that has a lot of money and they're looking for property in the US, they may just pay more because it's worth them to do it. So it almost comes back to it's in the eye of the beholder. How much would somebody pay for something?
No, I understand, but again, with the single families, if we have a trend that houses are selling for way more than they did the last time, whatever the last time be, their assessment is going to be pretty close to that.
Correct. The part of it that comes into play is you have a lot of single-family homes to compare to. When you get to looking at apartment complexes, you only have very few to pick from and compare to. So not many Avalons or not many Upland Woods sell that you could compare into. So the sales comparison approach doesn't really come into play. The income approach definitely comes into play. And if their income of what they're getting, if we use their actual income, that's what should come close to the value. But if they're projecting that down the road they're going to be making a lot more money, you can't just make up the figures. The DOR won't accept it. They'll kick it back.
But if they have quite a few vacant units during the year, that's going to skew their taxes.
Sure. It will come into play, especially when every year, all businesses are required by law to submit an income and expense. When I mentioned Windsor Gardens, they submit to us a sheet of paper that has every rental unit of what they charge and what they get. So that's their income, then they have their expenses, and then they have a cap rate. And that's how it's determined what the value should be. Somebody pays a lot more, there's usually something, an anomaly that's coming into play. You know, it's not just a standard, Tim McDonough buys from Allen Howard a house. It's an offshore company that's got a lot of money that's willing to pay for it because the tax ramifications might be better for them down the road.
As usual, great answers.
Well,
Thank you very
my
much,
pleasure.
Mr. McDonough.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Maloney,
Yeah,
sir.
that you actually, and Tim, the other thing you touched on there was cap rate. I mean, two potential investors might look at a property and one say, I'll be satisfied with a 5% return on this for whatever reason. Another would say, I'll take nothing less than 7%, and that'll just change the price that each one would pay. The income is the same, expenses are the same. It's just the expected return on investment differs, and so that differs the price. It changes the price.
It's a roll of the dice, and trust me, I would love to bring up the assessed value close to the sales price if we could. However, whatever we come up with, again, has to be approved by the state.
Yeah.
And if we jumped right to the sales price, they're gonna say, all right, show me how you got there. And the only way to do it on a property like that would be on the income, and the income just doesn't support it. So it's when we get the deeds from the registry, we have to determine the property that's sold. Was it a qualified sale? Was it an arm's length, a non-arm's length? You know, what's going on? Sometimes it's very easy to determine. You might see that, Paul Bishop sold a house to Patrick Bishop, so you'd say, all right, 2 Bishops is probably a family sale that went on. So it's not a qualified sale, so you can't really use that. What you want to find is fair market sales, which help us determine the full market assessed value. So there's a lot of factors that come in that change all throughout the year.
The other thing, too, you're talking about new growth and the full measuring list and how that affects it. We do that every 10 years, that super assessment. So presumably, I don't want to anticipate the information you're going to bring in next week, but presumably and you said the new growth figure is going to be higher than we usually project, or higher than the average of the last 4 or 5 years is about 950,000 per year. This appears to be likely to come in higher than that.
Yep.
But we only do this full measure and list once every 10 years or so, right? So
Yeah.
this is a one, I mean, new growth is always a one-time thing, so it probably, just thinking out loud here and asking your opinion, but it probably makes sense when we get together next week to talk in terms of, well, it does raise our tax levy limit to a certain amount, but that, we're not required to go to that limit. You might want to leave some for a low new growth.
That's a very good point, Mr. Maloney. I think I think I brought it last year, and I'll have the chart for next week, but it shows, yeah, historically, the new growth has been between 850, 950. There was one year, it was up to 1.2. That happened to be the same after a follow-up of a certification year. The state has changed their philosophy on doing full certification, which is a complete look at all the values. It used to be every 3 years due to the governor's change in municipal finance. They decided now it's going to be done every 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean that property values in commercial and residential aren't looked at every year, because they are. They're what they call interim years.
Mm-hmm.
So last year was a full certification. DOR came out, they go out to look at the properties, as well as our individual contractor that we hire. And it's much more in-depth. They want to look at all your books, all your values, all your income statements. That's done every 5 years. That's the certification year. Usually as a result of that, you pick up a much higher new growth, and then it gets back to historical, unless there's a big project that's coming down the pike. Like I say, Avalon will be 100%, so we'll pick up some new growth on that next year. We don't know what's going to happen with the UTI building. If Moderna does take that over, perhaps there'd be some new growth there. We did pick up some new growth. Norwood Hospital sold for a lot higher than it had been assessed at. So there are factors year to year, but on average, you're right. It's about that figure of 900,000, call it, and it doesn't usually fluctuate all that much, and it also depends upon the economy. Like I say, if you looked at this year. So we had the old building at 1412, 1420 Boston Providence, which was the Vara building. So that was torn down, so you lost the value of that building, but you picked up new value because now you have a BJ's gas station and you have a Wendy's. So the difference is that new growth, and hopefully new growth is going to continue, but there are other factors. It's the economy.
Yep.
It's the availability of land, which we don't have much left. Obviously, we all know that.
Zoning changes might help, well, might make a difference too.
It
right?
could with the downtown.
Downtown, we're looking at perhaps a rezoning of Route 1, too.
Exactly, yeah. So there are factors. I mean, it's always going to vary year to year. This year, I think you're going to be surprised at the new growth and happy with it. But you're right, just because you have it, the new growth, doesn't mean you have to.
It's not a compounding effect, it's a discrete.
No, sometimes you don't want to spend it.
Right.
Because all that really does is spread the burden on the taxpayers, and sometimes it's better to hold that back, but that's within the purview. But we'll give you, that'll be one of the options,
Okay.
obviously.
Thank you
next
very
week.
much, Mr. McDonough. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Mr. Maloney. Mr. Jha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on what Tom said, because that was one of the 2 points that I wanted to raise as well. The growth, because it is the 10-year, you got the big one. We're not going to see that every single year typically. Hopefully, it'll continue to rise, but not as big a jump this year, probably go down. I think that's why we need to be conservative about the numbers. I know the town manager has always been pushing us to be conservative on what you're projecting because it may come back and bite you. In this case, if we tried to forecast this high number going forward, it will hurt us.
Exactly.
And to Tom's point of trying maybe if we have the ability to stay below the 2.5% as protection, because if we are fortunate this year is the way you're projecting, next year we're not going to probably have that same high number. Now we have some room to maneuver, and I think that's important. Number two, in your presentation for next week, will we be able to see the effect of the numbers with override and without override, just so that we can show the people that look at the override, this is the effect of that, we all voted for it, so we knew it's coming. And then this is, if you didn't have the override, what your effect would be under normal circumstances. I just think it gives the people at least a little bit of understanding of the combined effect, instead of seeing one large number and everyone's taxes are going up by, a good number, and they get all upset about it and wants to keep everything low, low, low. And then you say, hey, look at, this is what the town voted for. This is that effect, and then you have the normal every year, and it may not be as bad as people think.
Absolutely, and I think that's an important part of the presentation that we have now, that as of just late this afternoon, I say that change in the new growth, it was determined where that new growth is going to go, or what we would recommend. But it's still, we're fresh into this override, and the taxpayers are, obviously they voted for it, they're going to see an increase in the taxes. But I agree with you, Mr. Ajad, that we could show, if there was no override, what would happen. There would be the standard 2.5% increase that happens every year as a result of Prop 2.5, and then there would be the new growth. This year, the new growth equates almost to 2.5%. The difference is the override, which equated to approximately 8%. So there is a big jump that happened anyway. So if the board can not go to the maximum on the levy, it will help soften the burden for the average taxpayer as a result of that. But yes, certainly I can put together some numbers that show, if there was no override, then it would probably be the 2.5% plus whatever new growth. And then if you add in the factor of the override, it'll show on average. And that's the other thing. The average home value went up about $30,000 from 452 725. I don't have the exact figure because I didn't bring 452. I should know it by heart.
452, 725.
Oh, I did know. I had it right. All right, I had the old one. See if I can.
To 481.
To 481, 340. So that's but now if the average property owner thinks about that, and also what we saw from the trend, the company that we hired, Vision, who came out and looked at all the properties, he said, I'm seeing kind of a steady number here of 6%. Property values were going up 6%. Condos were going up 6%. Single-family homes, 6%. Multifamilies were going up 6%. Commercial properties were going up 6%. So he laid it out to me, and we checked to make sure his numbers were right. And I said, and he said, there's something that, he said, I can't get it through. And I said, what is, he said, I just came from Hudson. He did the same exact process with the assessor in Hudson, which is further out by 495. And he came up with the same numbers, 6%, 6%. Yeah. So he thought he had transformed the wrong numbers, but it just shows that that's what's happening in the real estate market. And if you think about it, 2018, and that's what we're talking about, the values, people have been buying properties. I mean, in your own neighborhoods, if you go around and you'll look and see, you're almost astounded. They paid that for that. But that's what's happening in the market. You read about it. Well, you do. You read about it every day in the paper. Like, property values in the greater Boston area are going through the roof. And there's a shrinking market for people to buy. As a result, apartments and multifamilies are being able to charge more money for rental properties and getting the income. Avalon is just almost full from what I've been told. And they're getting top dollar. You're getting top dollar at...
I think people are getting forced out of the metropolitan Boston area.
Exactly.
Rosendale, for instance, 3-family homes 25 years ago, shot money.
Sure.
Now they're getting over $1 million.
Yeah, they're buying them. I saw that trend several years ago when I was appraising. They'd buy a multifamily, and all of a sudden they buy a 3-family for $450 in Rosendale, and then convert it to 3 condominiums, which they start selling for $500, $550. And they're still doing it. So that trend is still continuing. But to get back to the 6%, if you think about it, if you have a home, you really can't find a home in Norwood for under $400,000. If you do, it needs a lot of work. And I study banker and tradesmen. I go on multiple listing service, and I see what's on the market. and there might be 1, 2, maybe 3 houses for under 400,000. And for us that have been around for a while, that's a lot of money for a starter home. But that's what the market is dictating. You know, the $300,000 starter home 7 or 8 years ago is now a $400,000 starter home. And that's just what the market's bearing.
And a lot of times people will buy into a neighborhood more so than buy the house. They want that particular neighborhood, and they'll pay what they can pay for a house to get into
Exactly.
that neighborhood.
Exactly, and those are the two, I guess we're getting a little bit of a lesson on. So once the property values are determined, and then once you figure out what your taxes, your levy is, that's where we kind of are at the point now. We know what the property values are because the state has approved them. So we're very confident that the values are right. Now, how do you get to the tax rate? The tax rate is you take the values divided by what town meeting has approved and what they voted to spend. And now that you have that factor, you have to translate that into the value, which translates to the taxes. I know your job, this board and previous boards have always tried to balance any kind of a shift on the taxes to look out for the taxpayers, the residential property owners, while also being considerate to the businesses.
Correct, because we want the businesses, we want them to stay here, we want them to come into our town.
And we do have a lot of pluses that I've seen, from people, I get calls all the time from all over the country from businesses looking to relocate. And when I'm trying to sell them on Norwood, there are so many attributes that you can throw at them, not the least of the light department, but the residential tax rate. If people look around from town to town, and the services we get, I mean, today's a great example. Winter storm and the roads are great. If there are any power outages, they were fixed like that. So it's an easy town to sell, put it that way, especially when I talk to other assessors of how they're kind of managing it and getting through the economy at this stage.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashar. Mr. Plasko.
I move to continue the hearing till December 10th at 7 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion to continue for 1 week from tonight with the full board. And I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before you leave this evening, we've concluded that business. I'd like to, this meeting was scheduled for 1 hour, so we have, we're in need of a lot of
We
filler
have to
time to
stretch
get to
it.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, right.
Just for the public's
Okay.
edification, a public hearing, the public has been given a 48-hour notice on these hearings, but we are required to have them open at the appointed time. And the next hearing is at 8 p.m., so we have very little to do as far as new business this evening. So I'm going to ask Mr. McDonough if he talk about the Circle of Hope Luminary Night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would love to give you an update on the Circle of Hope and the Luminary Night, which is this Saturday evening. This is our 18th year, I believe, that we've lit up the Circle of Hope, lit up the Common. This board and previous boards have all been very supportive, not only of the Circle of Hope, but in particular the Luminary Night, where we ask people to purchase a luminary bag for $5 and write a note on it, either remembering somebody or remembering the season, or just buying a bag to help support the Circle of Hope. We're over 20 odd years now with the Circle of Hope, which was started in memory of a beautiful young lady named Michelle Kennedy, and her mom Lee had started the foundation with the promise of helping what the town did for her daughter to other people, to raise money if somebody was facing catastrophic illness and they didn't have anywhere else to turn. It started from a small group of several people around Lee Kennedy's dining room table, and it's still, that same group still meets here. 20-odd years later, we started with an initial grant from the Bach Foundation, which was granted through this board. I think it was $2,500. Right now, as of last week's meeting, we've given out in assistance $870,000 since we started. For things as simple as paying for parking at Dana-Farber, to paying a mortgage, to paying a fuel bill, for people that just don't have anywhere else to turn. I always like to say, everybody gives to the Jimmy Fund and Dana-Farber, and that's great, because they do so many good things. But the little things that we were able to do, helping people, it's just incredible. And we don't know, I don't even know who we help, I don't know how much money we give them. I just know that to get money out of the Circle of Hope, it goes through a process, and the people review it and are very vigilant about who gets the money.
It's confidential process.
It's completely confidential, and there is not one penny that comes in that does not go to help somebody in town. It's a tremendous group. In this particular, we have our Dancing with the Stars, which is a great fun night, and a lot of the board members here have been very involved in that, from dancing to judging. But the Luminary Night is very special because it's kind of the kickoff to the holiday season. I know there's a Christmas concert this Thursday night, I believe, and Saturday we have the Luminary Night. And if you've never seen it, even if you could just come down that night for a little bit of a time, just to walk around and see not only the bags that are lit up, but if you walk by and read some of the messages, it's overpowering. We're going to have the Colonial Boys there. The Madrigals will hopefully be there. We're going to have entertainment. We're going to have hot chocolate. It's from 5 to 7. It's at the Common. You can purchase luminary bags that evening, or you could see Lee Kennedy at the Civic, or any of the board members. It's truly a tremendous, just a couple of hours from 5 to 7. It promises to be one of the coldest nights of the year, as usual.
Always the first one.
Mrs. Kennedy had called me today to see if we could maybe move it back to Sunday, because it might be a little warmer, and that just wouldn't be right, that we have to keep it, plus the Patriots are playing Sunday.
I think that's part of the, I think that's a part of the
I didn't
allure,
really
though.
want to say that to Lee.
I think it's part of
but-
the allure. It's wintertime, it's the season, the cold weather, the snow on the ground. I think that's all a part of the package.
Yeah, I think it's just, like I say, it's an overwhelming, powerful feeling to come down there and see what your fellow citizens are feeling and remembering people. And it's a great money raiser for the Circle of Hope, which transfers to helping people. It helps your neighbors. That's the one thing, I tell people about the Circle of Hope. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and that's exactly what it is.
And it goes back to what you talked about in the real estate side. It's that kind of a town. It's got everything for everybody.
Exactly.
We take care of each other.
So I invite everybody here and everybody at home, hopefully, to stop by and bring the family.
Well, thank you for your almost 45-minute dissertation.
I told you I could do it if you
I
needed.
knew you would. So, thank you for the
Thank
information.
you,
on
Mr. Chairman.
Luminary
Thank you,
Night.
members, and we'll see you 1 week from
Right,
tonight.
and again, they can either contact Lee Kennedy at the Recreation Center during the day, or they can come that night, Saturday night, between 5 and 7, and purchase a bag at that time,
That's correct.
and have some hot chocolate.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very
Tim,
much.
on that,
Yes.
you put sand in the bags, a little
Yep.
bit of sand, a cup or so of sand in each bag. How many 50-pound bags of sand do you usually get?
We're very lucky because Home Depot donates those. We usually get about 20 bags per year. And
I thought it was even more than that.
And what's great is from our first year of standing there with plastic cups and filling it,
I know.
as you all have done.
Oh, yeah.
This year, Marcia Gertie and the other members of the board, they've already started filling the bags because we sell them in the schools. So a lot of the school kids like to already decorate them and put messages on them. So we've already started filling. You have to figure, we do almost 2,000 luminary bags. And it goes all the way around the corner.
Sure, we know.
We started this year, we tried to incorporate uptown businesses to kind of partake, and we're gonna slowly move into that. Obviously, we don't want lit candles up and down Washington Street, so we're gonna start out with candles that can be lit electrically. But that's where we wanna grow to eventually, but yeah, that's a lot of bags, and now we start going in, but if you get there at 3 o'clock on Saturday, you're gonna see a field of people coming out of all ages, high school kids come down to help
Right.
the sports teams.
Right.
And we'll have it done. So by 5 o'clock, the Colonial Boys will be marching, Jimmy Grover will be leading, and we'll be having a great night. So,
Any other comments? Mr. McDonough, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you.
Okay, as we said earlier, the public hearing was posted for 7 to 8 p.m., so we have about 17 minutes of time, and I'm sure we can fill that time. If we could get into new business, we have request number 1 for New Year's Eve, and it would be, would the board vote to approve the extension of hours on New Year's Eve, Tuesday, December 31st, 2019, until 2 a.m. rather than 1 a.m. Wednesday, January 1st, 2020, if the staff will notify all the licensed premises or licensees if that is the case.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Howard.
Thank you. This is something we do every year.
Correct.
So I make a motion that we approve the 2 a.m. closing.
Second.
Just a question.
Comment? Go ahead.
Yes. So we're basically just it's basically an overall extension of hours till
Right.
2 a.m.
On New Year's
all
Eve.
the conditions stay in place, everything else.
Right,
is just
absolutely.
Till 2 a.m.
It's just an extension from 1 a.m. until 2 a.m.
1 a.m. to 2
on
Okay.
New Year's Eve, 31st into the 1st.
Gotcha.
So I have a motion,
On a second.
and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to talk really slow. All in favor and opposed, unanimous. That brings us up to number 2, which is an informational. James Malia, Constable, submitting a letter of resignation effective November 30th, 2019.
Information file.
Second?
I have a motion to file this information and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Manager, do you have an update that could last a few more minutes?
Well, let's see if I can get through 15
I'm
minutes.
sure you can.
Couple of different updates. I should just always have the OPEB presentation ready to go just for the heck of it. I mean, I brought my budget book just in case we need some additional material, but I just want to thank our assessor, Timmy McDonough, for taking up the majority of the hour because it would have been tough for me to get through. Few small updates for the board. The Traffic Advisory Committee has met. We will have some updates and recommended action items for the board next week. There's probably about half a dozen different items they have reviewed. We'll have some recommended changes to our traffic rules and regulations, recommended installation of some signs somewhere. There's some other items that we'll be sort of sending to traffic review or sending to study, but we'll have information from them shortly. Just an update on the storm. We actually weathered the storm fairly well. There was only one power outage actually yesterday. We had one tree down for a short period of time. Other than that, there were no power outages. We reported no damaged equipment. I'm always happy with the great job the DPW does. We are struggling to find and maintain contractors. We actually lost a few of our contractors to a large commercial contract at Gillette Stadium, so that's always tough. This time of year, towns are always struggling to get contractors. With the economy, it's getting a little bit more difficult. It's a challenge with a good economy that people are able to go where the highest dollar amount is, and even paying that prevailing wage isn't always available or doesn't always guarantee the availability. I know towns throughout the Commonwealth are struggling with that issue, but the DPW did a great job. Public safety reports low activity, which is always important during any storm for folks if you don't have to be out on the roads to stay off the roads. The fewer accidents that we have to respond to reserves our capacity to respond when we absolutely have to respond to an incident. Hydrants are in good shape, but it's always a good idea to shovel out your local friendly hydrant that's near or adjacent to your house. We do a great job with it, but obviously the DPW and other departments can't get to all the hydrants in town, so if there's one near your house, it's always in your best interest to shovel out the hydrant. A couple items for the board I do have for your signature this evening. This is the intermunicipal agreement between the town of Norwood and Sharon for the energy manager position. It's been sent to them and their council. Our council's reviewed it, the board approved it. Now we just need the actual 2 copies of the signed documents so that we can send it off to them, and we'll be posting that position shortly. So if the board would be able to sign that this evening and get that to me, that would be helpful. 1 copy for us, 1 copy for them. I think the signature sheets are on the last page. The Christmas holiday concert is this Thursday at the Norwood Theater. All proceeds go to the Norwood Fine Arts Program. Tickets are available at the door, and it is $15 a ticket. The doors open at 6:30 and the show starts at 7:30. We will be having the Menorah Lighting Festival, again, ceremony rather, this December 22nd on the Common at 5 p.m. The board approved this a couple weeks ago. We did this last year for the first time. This will be the second annual event, so we're looking forward to that. As I mentioned in relation to the IMA agreement with Sharon, we'll be posting the energy manager job description soon, probably tomorrow or the following day. The school building committee will be doing our first site visit in the next couple of weeks. I believe we're going to Natick to view a similar school that we would be looking at, built in the last 5 to 10 years. So we will have a report out to that when that happens. I'm going to pass out a flyer here for the board. I know we've mentioned this. There is a very important community event on January 9th. I know we don't want to think of 2020, but it's right around the corner. January 9th, 2020, in the high school auditorium, the town is hosting Alex Berenson, who is an award-winning author and former New York Times reporter. He's the author of Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence. It's a community presentation on marijuana truths and risks. It's being sponsored by Impact Norwood and the Health Department and the Norwood Police Department. So the book that he actually wrote, I found fascinating. I read the book, came back from vacation, ordered several copies, have had folks in the Health Department and in public safety read the book. Really takes a unique approach on the question of marijuana in society. So fascinating book. I think he'll be an interesting author. Be a great speaking opportunity. It's open to the community as a whole. We are asking that folks register. You can go to impactnorwood.org/upcoming-events and you can actually register. We are holding in the high school auditorium, so we do have good capacity, but we just want to make sure that we don't go over capacity for the actual event. Trash has been delayed by 1 day this week. That's probably the #1 call we get when after a storm is whether or not trash has been delayed. Trash has been delayed a day, not a week. So your regular day is getting pushed out 1 day this week. One item of discussion that the board may not want to take up today, of course, but at some point in the future is the question of short-term rentals. So that would be Airbnb or renting on a site like Vacation Rentals by Owner. The state passed a law about a year ago effectively adding the hotel tax to short-term rentals, and it was actually a long time coming. So we will automatically collect that rental through the state just as we would with any hotels in town with the hotels tax we do. There is an option for an additional 2 to 3% surcharge on short-term rentals should the town want to accept that. I believe it's done through town meeting. The question that we have is short-term rentals, as we understand them, actually aren't allowed under the town's bylaws. We do know they happen. It's if you go on Airbnb, you can type in really any town. As you know, the question sort of became how do these become regulated under the state? But it's something we may want to discuss. Do we look at adding that short-term tax? But then do we have to make any changes to our zoning code to actually allow short-term rentals? Do we want that? There may not be a prohibition on doing that. Most of the opposition to short-term rentals is based in zoning codes dating back decades to prevent boarding houses. So this is sort of a challenge, but something we may want to take up as we go into the winter, into the spring, and talk with the planning board about, especially what we may want to look at for the spring town meeting, for annual town meeting, I should say, as to whether or not we want to actually do something about it. That there's not really a lot of revenue in it, but Airbnb is growing. It's coming further and further out into communities. It's not a big presence here in Norwood. The revenue amount is minor, but it may be something that the board wants to look at discussing and providing some guidance to staff and working with the planning board on whether or not it's something we want to address, or is it something we relatively leave unaddressed because there's not a lot of revenue or regulation thereof. 2 points of happy note. We conducted interviews earlier in the week for the deputy fire chief position. As the board knows, we have one position that was added, and we will be replacing Ron Maggio as he retires after a long career with the town at the end of this year. So we have made one promotion. Lieutenant Dave Hayes, who has served us for 27 years in the Norwood Fire Department, will be the next deputy chief of the Norwood Fire Department. He will begin his service sometime around January. So we're very happy to that. I think he'll be a great addition to the team at the fire department, and certainly I know Chief Maurice will look to his assistance in moving the fire department forward and taking on a lot of the initiatives that we've started over there. So we're very happy about that. There's also been a promotion and Chief Brooks will be bringing him by to meet and greet with the board, I believe, at his next report to the board. Chief Maurice, sorry. There's also been a promotion at the police department. We have promoted Officer Kevin Joseph to the position of sergeant. So Sergeant Joseph has been with us just under 2 years, but has around 8 years as a police officer in total. He's a Norwood native, and he's also a graduate of Bridgewater State University. So he comes with a phenomenal educational background. As you know, Bridgewater State University provides a great undergraduate and graduate program, and has been providing the town of Norwood with great public servants for many years to come. So we're very happy about him and his qualifications. So we are happy for both of those announcements. And I believe with that, even though we have a few moments left, I would be more than happy to answer any questions the board may have on any of these items or any other items that you may have.
Absolutely,
Two
go ahead.
questions. One is that I think when I was at the seminar with DLS this past September, they talked about the state law that governs proposals by towns to adopt changes that would allow them to collect the taxes. The state has a listing of within each town. You can get from them how many are in your community. So it's not like you have to run around and do it, but you could get a list for them, and that might be helpful to know so that you can see if this is worth really doing. If we have 3 properties that are doing it, then it's really, what I don't know, would you do it? But if you had 25 properties, then you would say, well, that's really something to seriously consider. So we
Yeah.
want to start.
Our number is it's closer to the 3. The dollar amount as of today is not a whole lot in terms of revenue, especially with, I think we take $600,000 or $700,000 in on hotel excise tax. We might be looking at a couple $1,000s more. Of course, we want every revenue dollar we have. The challenge we're going to have to look at is, do we then need to change our zoning regulations, and how difficult and complex is that going to be if we want to allow it? And then, as you know, the challenge with short-term rentals is the enforcement. Do we really spend the zoning officer telling them to go looking on Airbnb and then running to houses, and it becomes a challenging enforcement issue. It's one of the reasons it took the state so long to finally agree on just charging the same hotels tax, which we'll collect regardless. The state actually collects that for us, but it'd be worthwhile point of discussion for the board at some point.
Second is there a reason why the senior center operation is tied to whether the schools are open or closed?
I just realized that myself when I saw that come out yesterday.
Why?
When the
Well,
schools
if-
close, the senior center closes.
Yep.
Correct. We don't want seniors going out when when the weather's not good. That's actually common in a lot of communities, that seniors generally, we don't want the bus running, we don't want seniors out there if there's challenges with transportation. So it's easy to say if the schools have been closed, you keep the senior center closed. They wouldn't want to be there. That's at their request and their discretion. It's different if we were to open it as an emergency warming shelter, but we generally, when the weather's bad, we don't want seniors out on the road.
There's
We don't
also
want anyone on the
potential
road.
for falls.
Correct.
So on.
The potential risk there goes up. So most senior centers like to play it safe when the weather's bad, and have their participants stay warm at home.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else from the board? So much for the manager's update. We can either go through the selectmen's agendas if anybody has any comments.
Yeah, a couple of things.
If you can do it in the next 38 seconds. Or we can wait till after the hearing. We have 5
Couple of
minutes.
minutes.
I'll be quick.
Less than 1 minute per selectman.
Shall we discuss whether or not we do this? No. No, actually, just a couple of community calendar things. I see Mr. Mizuko mentioned the holiday concert, and Mr. Chairman, you're going to talk about that. No, you can hold on to it. So I got a couple of things. First of all, the weather being as bad as it was on Thanksgiving morning, I decided that my back was giving me trouble, so I did not attend the Norwood-Dedham football game. However, I did watch it on NCM Live, and want to congratulate the Norwood High School team for a great last-second victory, and NCM for a terrific broadcast from Dedham. They really did a great job, and kudos to everybody. Kudos to the seniors, such as Aiden Pryor and Connor Sheehan and all the rest of them on the team, and to the NCM staff who worked the event. And second, and I'll bring this up again next week, I forgot, I have a flyer and I left it at work. The Parkway Concert Orchestra will be hosting its 75th annual holiday concert on Sunday, December 15th at the First Congregational Church here in Norwood at the corner of Walpole and Winter Streets, okay? The show time is at 4 o'clock, doors open at 3:30. It's a great program of Tchaikovsky and a lot of other famous composers, and your correspondent has been asked to give a performance reading. 'Twas the night before Christmas, so I'm honored to be able to do that. And I'll bring in the flyer next week to remind you. But it's Sunday, December 15th at the First Congregational Church, 4 p.m. is going to be a wonderful concert by the Parkway Concert Orchestra. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anything else from the board? Anybody tonight?
I did have one more item. Sorry, Mr.
Are
Howard.
we going, our agendas, you mean?
If you have something without getting into any
No,
48 hour.
this is pretty quick.
Okay.
First thing, The Day House has several entertaining presentations that they have this year, probably about a half a dozen or so. If you go on the Historical Society's website, you can see exactly what they have going on. Some of them look real good, if not all of them. So you might find something that you'd really enjoy down there to take advantage of. So having said that, the town political season is fast approaching. The deadline for nomination papers is February 18th this year in Norwood. I just want to make public notice that I will not be running for re-election next April. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. It is now 7:58. Is there
I have one
anything
more
else?
item if you'd like me to. Could NTM pull up the photo we have for the screen?
I'm going to regret this, I know I will.
I'm sure. So last November 20th marked 31 years to the date that John Carroll was appointed as general manager. November 20th, 1978. So that is John there, second from the, 40, sorry, my math is off. That is John there, third from the left, with his wife Penny. And I believe that's Marty Lydon on the left.
Correct.
Yes, and Joe Curran.
And Joe Curran. So we just, one of the interns, we posted this on the town social media page. They dug this photo out of one of the old town reports, but we thought it was a great photo of John and company, and kudos to John on his many years of service to the town. And I believe his wife Penny just celebrated her 80th birthday as well.
That's great.
So that is
Thank
all
you.
I have, Mr. Chairman, and I do believe it's now 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
or as close to it as we
7:59,
can
and
be.
thank you for your information. And we have a public hearing. Mr. Aus, if you'd like to come in and have a seat. This is a public hearing. Mr. Aus of 18 Plimpton Avenue is requesting, submitting an application for Class 2 dealer's license at that location, 18 Plimpton Avenue, number 2. Would the clerk please read the notice?
Application for Class 2 motor vehicle license. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Norwood will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019, at 8 p.m. in Room 34, Selectmen's Chambers, Norwood Town Hall, on application of Amazon Auto Services, 18 Plimpton Avenue, number 2, Norwood, Mass, for a Class 2 motor vehicle license. Board of Selectmen, Polly Bishop, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I pronounce the name properly? Aus?
Absolutely. Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Did something right today. Okay, you're looking for a Class 2 license to operate, Class 2 motor vehicle, used motor vehicle license to operate out of that location at 18 Plimpton Avenue. Could you tell this board exactly what you have in mind, sir?
Absolutely. Currently I am in the business of cybersecurity, and I'm just expanding through the town to start a dealership, pretty much, used auto shop. The plan is to obtain the licenses first through the town, see what there are other additional requirements, and expand from there to an actual lot within the town, supposedly, hopefully.
When you say an actual lot, you're talking about cars?
Yes, sir. As far as my understanding from the the building inspector, due to the kind of this application, I'm not allowed to, park or operate any cars that's not registered through the property due to the zoning. So that's where the lot situation got mentioned.
Questions from the board? Mr. Plasko?
Why wouldn't you get your business all plans and then come for the license? Why come for the license first?
Mainly because I already have a full-time situation that I'm working with right now.
What do you mean a full-time situation you're working with?
I currently I am employed, so this is just a start of a business before I fully jump into it. I'm trying to have all the ducks in a row before getting into a lease, a contract, getting all the other paperwork through owning a potential lot.
Well, typically, we would give an application to a location. So now you're gonna have it go to your house, and you're gonna get a lot, and we're gonna have to transfer it to that location.
Correct. Not right away, but that's the
And so
future
what are you
plan.
gonna do in the meantime? Not right away.
In the meantime, with the actual license?
I'm sorry?
With the actual license,
Yeah,
you mean?
what are you gonna be doing? Where are you gonna be storing cars? How are you gonna be operating?
I will not be operating any cars through the property itself. I do have a mechanic that I usually work with, right on the street on Broadway, And if any cars that potentially get stored, it will be at that location. That if started.
There'll be no vehicles at number 18 Plimpton Avenue.
That's correct.
On display for storage or anything else.
Correct.
At this time or any other time in the future.
Absolutely correct.
Sir?
But you're gonna put cars on Pleasant Street. You're gonna sell those cars? Or you're just gonna store them?
No, so definitely not selling until, like I mentioned, getting the actual location set up and going.
How many cars can you store at that location?
4.
Four?
Correct.
I'm sorry, Pleasant Street or Broadway?
Neither. Broadway.
Broadway.
Yes, sir.
So once you buy 4 cars, that's it? You can't sell them, you can't do anything with them? You're just gonna sit on them for months or years, whatever, till you get a location?
Not at all. I'm definitely brand new into the idea of owning my own business, so I wasn't sure how the process goes with the town. That's really the whole process.
Mr. Hajar?
I'm a little confused.
Please.
So,
As we all are.
Typically, what we see is an individual that comes before us that wants to operate out of their home or apartment.
Yes.
For something like this that have come before us before is they're working with some type of auction house and they buy and sell, which is allowable, but it's never sold on the property itself. They do it from the auction house and then it goes wherever it goes. This doesn't sound like you're doing that. So I'm concerned that maybe you don't fully understand what needs to be done. So when you say, it sounds like you mimicked when it says state clearly the purposes for which a license is requested, you sort of copied what the state says on their, on the form, which is to buy, sell, exchange, or assemble secondhand motor vehicles. So this license is for the location at 18 Plimpton Ave. You can't assemble anything there, so we'd have to take that off. If you talk about buy, selling, and exchanging, you can do that via computer
Correct.
for someplace off-site, but you can't actually have vehicles at this premises, which you're asking to be licensed for, and then have someone come and pick it up and make either an exchange or give you a check and they drive off with the vehicle. That can't happen here. So that's why I'm a little confused based on what you're telling my colleague.
Yeah, and then if you're gonna use another address, then that's the address that should be on the license.
So if you wanted to do it via computer and then the transaction of the vehicle itself happens elsewhere, that would be okay. But if you're talking about trying to get this license for this site and
Right.
then get a lot in which you could actually store those vehicles and then sell them, I think you have the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You should have your place where you want to do the business and then ask for a license at that place of business.
Understood.
That's just my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. I did show up prior submitting the application, mainly because most of the questions that I was confused with, thank you for clarifying. The main goal originally was to never have a vehicle stored at any location, including my own property. The whole idea of the property was just to have an office that I can operate
Headquarters.
through.
The world headquarters.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman,
But you don't have anything to operate.
correct me if I'm wrong, and Christina may have the answer to this. Didn't the board approve a license similar for somebody who wanted to be able to go to auctions and buy and sell cars?
Their purpose,
But-
their
but
purpose was
wouldn't-
to sell wholesale.
Right, but they weren't going to be storing vehicles at their property. Somebody just said you need to have the license to do that. And I believe the board approved that contingent on no vehicles being.
Right, but their explanation was they were gonna be in the wholesale business. He's gonna be in the retail business.
Right.
Totally
This was like
different.
we did on Winslow and Winfield.
There's a few, there's a few in
Right.
there.
We've done it in other locations in the past also. But these are people here that work at home. They may never even see the vehicle. They buy it,
Right.
the auction, they get back on the computer and they sell it over here
Or
somewhere.
they're selling overseas and they
Or they're
already
selling
have,
overseas,
they already
put it
have
in
the
a storage
connections
box.
made up for those
So,
sales.
Mr. Howard?
Yeah, thank you. A little clarification if I can.
please,
I'm not giving you advice, mind you. I'm just clarifying.
Taken.
Okay? We have had other people who have come in front of us with a similar request
Right.
in that they could utilize their home to buy and sell vehicles. As has been said here, most of them do not take possession of the vehicle even. That one party had told us that they sold these vehicles overseas somewhere. And others just said that on the internet that they already had possible buyers for vehicles, and again, not taking possession of the vehicles. So, you know, again, not trying to give you advice, yet give you advice. You
Please.
might want to look into it a little more before you take the giant step.
So, thank you. There was two part of the research that I've done myself, and also from talking to friends that's already in the business, that potentially started the way you guys are mentioning as a wholesale, where you never really interact with the actual vehicle as it's in possession, nor seeing or inspecting the actual car after you purchased it. Even with that process, everything gets potentially stored at the actual auction where you purchase the vehicle. My understanding, which the little confusion that clearly I'm showing here, is I thought I still need to have the office, like you're saying, through like a headquarter, but also still being able to have, because based on the application, is you still have to have a shop that you work
Premises
with.
for the cars, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So this is
Not
where the
necessarily.
potential explanation that I came up with, where I went and talked to an actual mechanic around the corner from us. But if that is not even needed,
You're not distinguishing
that-
between retail and wholesale, and that's the issue that we're gonna have the difficulty with. You can't operate a wholesale business from the address that you're listing. So we couldn't, I mean, a retail
Okay.
from this location.
Okay.
So I don't see us, just me, having.
No, that
to
makes
be able to
sense,
grant you.
based on that
If you're
explanation.
saying you're gonna do wholesale from this location and eventually turning into a retail, and then come back before this board and say, I want to transfer the license to an actual physical location to do retail, that's different. But it sounds like you want to jump right into the retail business. Can't be done from this location.
I understand. I'm sorry for the confusion. That is
okay.
not
Don't
the
be sorry.
purpose.
Don't
That
be
is not the
And the
purpose
other
of my
thing-
explanation.
The other thing, if it's the same I don't know which Broadway is it the one at the gas station also?
Right before.
Or is it the body shop?
It's the body shop.
Yeah, he's
I
got-
believe it was,
He's
used
got
to
more
be.
storage, but still, I don't know.
This,
I don't know, but-
again, this
But I
whole
do know on the auction, you only get a couple days
5 days.
to get that vehicle that you buy out of there. You
Correct.
don't get much time, so you want to be aware of that too.
I am aware. So the main reason I went the extra step, which sounded completely wrong to my request, and talked to the mechanic and to hold the car pretty much on the premises, is because the application requested where and who is your mechanic. Or where you're going to be storing this vehicle, when my intentions is to really not get to a mechanic at all, because I'm not going to have
You don't
possession
really
of
have
it.
to do that. You can do wholesale. You can do wholesale.
Yeah,
I can.
You can, yeah, without a mechanic or anything.
Would you recognize
yeah,
Mr.
can't do
Davis?
retail.
Completely understand. I'm not even interested in the business of doing a retail at this moment.
Mr. House, let me see if I can try to clarify this a little bit more. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Mulvihill, our clerk, and she can go into some.
So I think that what you did was go that, here's where I could store the cars if I had to, or here's where I would repair them if I had to. That portion of the application doesn't apply to a residential license. So, because that was unclear, I think he said, okay, if I have to repair the car somewhere, where would I do that? Here's where I would do it. He doesn't need that portion.
I don't.
You're not gonna take possession of the cars. We
Correct.
don't want you to. So,
According, yes,
right.
based on the wholesale.
Just said he was going to, just
Well,
said he might buy up to 4
because-
cars and have them stored.
Based on the storage that
Right.
I had to discuss with the gentleman.
Right.
If you
But if I
store
don't
the-
have to do
So then you're
that,
gonna
No, you
sell them
don't.
from that location,
No.
so that's
So
gonna
you
be
sort of,
retail.
you've contracted for 4 slots.
yes, sir.
Okay, and now, well, I might as well fill them, but now you find a well, you can't quite consider,
I
okay.
pretty much showed up to the shop because we had, a few of our cars repaired there before, because they're very local. And I said, here's what I'm interested in doing, and part of the application process, because you're a business owner, it requires me to have a shop. Can I? And what's the options that potentially that we have, try choosing you at this location? And he was like, well, I am available. Here's, the potential plans if you would like to go to. And that's when I came back and I'm like, okay, well, that's what it says in the application. Do you have the application? Fill it in.
Do you have anything else, Christine, you wanted to add?
I believe that initially, the plan would be, you're gonna work from a home office, acquire cars at an auction, leave them at the auction, and then
Yes.
transfer them to whoever is gonna buy them.
Correct.
But because of the confusion, I think about what part of the application applies to a residential and a non-residential business, you thought you had to have
Right.
a repair shop. You do not.
I wasn't clear
Yeah,
on that
you
part,
don't-
so I just continued filling the
Right,
blanks. pretty much.
so what he's talking about is just the same as what everybody else was talking
No,
about.
he's not. It's not what he's.
He's not gonna take the cars.
He is gonna take the cars. He's gonna buy up to 4 cars, he just said.
No.
I'm not
No.
gonna take any possession of the vehicles, but
Yeah.
because of that part of the application,
You're
I
not
went
gonna
the extra
store them at
step.
Broadway Street.
Correct.
Because if you store
I
them at
went the
Broadway
extra
Street and
mile.
sell them from your house, they're actually retail selling from Broadway Street.
Understood.
You don't have a license
Based on the
for that.
stipulation, it makes more sense
Right.
now. I'm saying I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I went the extra mile of making sure to fill the blanks in the application and went with that plan. But if I don't even need to go that far because the plan is still to remain wholesale and never see the cars, that actually makes my life easier. And I don't need to have all that extra responsibility right now.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman, real quick? Do you have a market identified? I mean, do you already know where you want to sell the cars?
I do.
In
When you're saying a market, as in like the
Wholesale,
people
wholesale,
or
wholesale customers.
wholesale. You're going to sell them to whom?
to whom?
Yeah.
So the whom is not really specific to anybody specific, 'cause it's the car sales. It
Okay.
doesn't matter who buys your car, and you're not. You're only attacking a specific market
So you're not
based on
selling
the rest.
wholesale, you're selling retail.
Not really. No,
Sounds
it's-
like retail to me.
So I would appreciate the understanding of the differentiation between the two things that I might be confused with, but that's not what I'm requesting.
That is what you're requesting.
Well, let's say, Bill, can I just ask one, I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but the licenses given to, say, Winslow and Winfield, though, they were with the understanding that people are going to buy automobiles at auction and sell them to whomever. Is that fair
They
to say?
told us they were gonna buy them at auction.
And have them shipped.
They were gonna stay at auction for a week or whatever they're allowed to pay for storage there. And by that time, they were gonna transfer them to their wholesale customers, sell them out. So they were never coming to the retail
Which are
establishment.
typically overseas.
And
Okay,
all of
but
those
we don't, but we, so if this applicant basically wants to take the same approach, he would be in conformity with earlier decisions, no?
Except for that's not what he's telling us he wants to do.
That would be
If it
true,
was all
Tom,
wholesale.
except you have to take the word "or assemble" out of this request, right?
Correct.
Okay, just so
Yeah.
that we're clear.
I think we agreed on that
And if his
earlier. that-
intentions are what he is explaining now, that he fully understands what the requirements are, I think that would be fine if we take "or assemble." I would just leave it to buy, sell, or exchange.
I think he took that verbiage from
Right
the
from the
state
state.
license,
Yes.
not knowing exactly what to
Right.
do.
Right.
Correct?
That's correct.
I don't want to speak for you, but, anything else on the board?
Close the hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Anything on the motion?
Just to close the hearing, you mean, or,
To close the hearing.
yeah, no, nothing on the motion to close the
Okay.
hearing.
I have a motion to close the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Anything from the board? Motions?
Motion to deny.
Oh,
Mr. Deja.
I was going to move to approve.
Well, tell you what, I'll
Right.
second the motion to deny for discussion.
Can I offer, sorry, just a suggestion?
Sure.
Since there seems to be
Confusion.
some confusion between what the applicant specifically wants to do, what the board normally licenses, and whether or not he actually needs a license to achieve what he wants to do. What we've done in the past is we've postponed a decision a week or so to let an applicant come in and just work with the staff and make sure we're all on the same page.
Except for we just closed the hearing.
I think the hearing is closed. I think he can postpone a decision on the hearing until.
Oh, we can postpone a decision, yeah, sure.
Correct.
We don't have to vote right away.
Because
Yeah.
if you remember, we had this happen maybe 6 months ago where we
But
want to make sure that somebody's applying for the correct license, and since there's a little bit of a disagreement here, maybe we could
Ibrahim.
give it a week and he could work with somebody on the board or work with the staff and.
Right.
But that's also collecting new data, which is information which comes to the hearing.
If you felt it fundamentally altered the hearing, you could always reschedule a hearing, or if you just felt that there's clarification, it might just be that.
Why don't we just get, if the board was to vote to deny, which we haven't taken a vote yet, then the applicant can just make a new application and we deal with it when it comes forward in the proper form. Get it proper and deal with it.
I think with some slight modifications, we can accomplish that.
It's not like you're paying hundreds of dollars of fees and everything here. There's no particular burden.
No, I do believe we have a posting cost, not that it's in any way substantial, but if we think we're 80 or 90% there and it's just maybe a small change, my recommendation would be have the applicant work with somebody on the board, and maybe you don't come to a meeting of the minds, but.
I'd be happy to work with Mr. Outhouse to try to get this clear or clearer so that we're all on the same page regarding what his specific request is.
Okay,
And my personal feeling is I don't think it's gonna be that major that we'd have to start all over
it's a matter of
again.
tweaking this to get the right
I
verbiage.
understand Bill's point about we've closed the hearing, but I don't think anything of substance is going to change other than making it clearer on the form about what his request is. I think now that we've had this exchange back and forth, he understands our concerns and he understands what he
He
needs to.
just told us in response to Mr. Maloney's question that he hasn't got any wholesale market range. He told us he's gonna buy cars and store them. He's gonna be selling retail, and that's not a proper location for a retail
But
establishment.
I think he also said the opposite too, that
think
he
it's
set
a
it
matter
up that
of-
way, thinking that that's what he needed to do to obtain his license. So since he hasn't started his business, we can make sure that it's on the right path from day one so that there's not an issue. I don't think we have to hold this up for another hearing, another posting, and more back and forth. I think we all heard him say, information, can we just come back next week with clearer information and just,
Mr. House, Mr. House,
Great.
would you be willing to discuss this with Mr. Hajar, work out the details, and if need be, with Mrs. Mulvihill, get everything where it should be, come back next week, and we will take a vote. We won't have a hearing, we'll just take a vote on it.
He needs to take a vote now.
Want to take a vote now?
You have
well, he made a motion and Tom seconded.
Oh, no, that's, okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Right.
What was that?
It
Aye.
was a motion to deny.
That motion to deny.
Motion to deny, aye. Anybody else?
No.
That motion fails.
Motion to delay 1 week while we work with Mr. House on the submission of a revised application.
Second.
Second that with with the stipulation that he confer with Mr. Hajar during that time.
That's where I was about 90 seconds ago. So I have a motion to postpone for 1 week until we can work this out with the appropriate parties. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and we have one opposed. Correct?
Aye.
So 4-1. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Daniel.
Make sure that Mr. Hajar has your information, and
I mean, I would have
all
him
the information,
contact
okay.
Christina and. both of them.
Christina and Mr. Hajar and yourself will work it out, and hopefully we can bring it to a resolution beneficial to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You take
Unless-
a recess, that wouldn't happen.
That concludes our business for the evening, so unless
Do you
one of
have
the
that?
board members has something to add,
Is there an announcement there? No?
you have something to?
No? Sorry. Just you?
Okay, this is a repeat of what the manager's already spoken to us about. The Norwood Community Choral presents the Christmas Holiday Concert, a celebration of the season, to be held this coming Thursday night, December 5th, 7 p.m. I'm sorry, 7:30 p.m. at the Norwood Theater. Tickets are going for $15. If you would like to get a ticket in advance, you could call 781-769-2746. 769-2746. It also says you can send checks payable to the Norwood Holiday Concert Box 51 in Norwood, but it's kind of close to time here, so I would forget that one. Call for tickets in advance if you could at 781-769-2746. And again, the doors open at 6:45. It's open seating, so if you want a good seat, get there at 6:45. And that's all I have
Motion to adjourn?
for the evening.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? We will see you next week, December 10th.